Paula, what is Qatar saying about this?
Well, we have a strong statement from Qatar, as you might imagine. They have issued a statement through their foreign ministry spokesperson saying that this attack is a, quote, criminal assault, also saying that it is cowardly and that it is a blatant violation of international laws and norms. Now, Doha would be furious with what has happened. It's worth pointing out, as Jeremy mentioned there, that the Hamas main negotiator, Khalil al-Hayya, is stationed in Doha. He also met with the Qatari Prime Minister, who's also the foreign minister, just on Monday, we understand. And the Prime Minister was trying to push him and urge him to accept this US proposal for the ceasefire hostage deal that was on the table. So there were active negotiations between Hamas stationed in Doha and the Qatari Prime Minister. Now, Qatar has been one of the key mediators alongside Egypt and the United States, and this is certainly a very shocking development. Now, we have seen Israel targeting Hamas leadership in other countries. We have heard repeatedly from the Israeli Prime Minister that nobody in Hamas is safe and they will target them wherever they are. But in the past, they have targeted them in Tehran, for example, in Syria, in the deeper past, in Jordan. But there has not been this kind of attack somewhere like Doha. And also, of course, it was Ismail Haniyeh, who was the political chief of Hamas, who was assassinated in Tehran. He at the time was the chief negotiator. And if, as Jeremy suggests, it was again the chief negotiator for this ceasefire hostage deal that has been targeted, it raises questions once again about whether Israel wants this deal to be done. The timing is very surprising, given the fact that this new US proposal was on the table. The US President Donald Trump had given his verbal approval of it, saying he didn't want to see some hostages released one day and then some more the next week. He wanted all hostages released at the same time. That is what this deal is. It was on the table. We understand Hamas was looking at it. So, of course, a good question is, what does this mean for that deal now? Now, another interesting point that the Qatari officials gave in this statement was they say that it was residential buildings that were targeted. These buildings were housing several members of the Hamas political bureau. But the fact that it was residential buildings that were targeted in Doha, again, significant. We don't believe that there was a warning for people on the ground. Was this just Hamas who was impacted in this strike?
All right, Paula Hancock, thank you very, very much. We'll stay in close touch with you. I want to go get the latest from the White House. Kevin Liptak is there for us. Kevin, what are you hearing from White House officials?
Yeah, officials still very much digesting the news of what happened is on the ground there in Doha. According to an Israeli official, the U.S. was notified ahead of time of their plans to carry out this strike. We have not gotten confirmation of that from the White House, and I think that that will be a very critical piece of information as we sort of digest what is happening here. As both Jeremy and Paula have noted, this comes at quite a critical moment. President Trump, as recently as Sunday, said that he thought a deal in Gaza could happen very soon as a result of this new plan that he had put on the table that would result in the immediate release of all 48 of those hostages in exchange for Israel ending its campaign to occupy Gaza City. He also wrote something of an ominous warning on Truth Social that day, saying that he's warned Hamas about the consequences of not accepting this deal, that this was his last warning, there will not be another one. So whether that was issued with the knowledge that Israel was planning this attack is a question that I think we have heading in to today as we hear more from White House officials about what exactly transpired here. The other question is what this does to the U.S.-Qatar relationship. This has been quite a critical relationship. The Qataris have spent ample time trying to cultivate President Trump and his administration over the last several months. President Trump was the first U.S. president to visit Qatar back in May. Qatar hosts the forward headquarters of CENTCOM at Al Udeid air base. So some critical components of the U.S. national security infrastructure housed in Qatar. And according to Qataris who have said this over the last several years, it is actually the United States who asked Qatar to host Hamas's political leadership in Doha as a venue to have these kinds of negotiations. So how all of this sort of adds up over the coming hours, I think, remains to be seen. Just one more thing, Wolf. We have heard from the U.S. Embassy in Doha. They're saying that they've seen the reports of these missile strikes. They say that they've issued a shelter in place at their facilities, and they're encouraging U.S. citizens who live in the Qatari capital to shelter in place as well. So the U.S. government now advising both its employees at the embassy, but also all citizens in the Qatari capital to shelter in place as the fallout of this attack becomes known.
Yeah, it's really a serious, major development that's unfolding right now. And Kevin, a lot of people probably don't realize that the U.S. and Qatar have an extremely close military-to-military relationship. The U.S. Military Central Command, for example, has bases at the El Udeid Air Base. A lot of Air Force personnel are there. And Camp Asaliya, as you pointed out, ground troops. That's basically a regional headquarters for the U.S. Military's Central Command. There are a lot of U.S. military personnel on the ground right now in and around Doha, Qatar. So that's a significant development. We'll continue to watch and monitor that as well. We'll see if that had any impact on this Israeli decision to go ahead and target these facilities in and around Doha, Qatar, where they suspect Hamas officials may be. But these negotiations are continuing. All right, Kevin Liptak, thanks very much. Paula Hancock, Jeremy Diamond, thanks to you as well.
Yeah, and we should also note, when you look at the U.S. and Qatar relationship, it was Qatar that gifted, controversially, that luxury jet to President Trump recently to replace Air Force One. It is a close ally of the United States, so it will be interesting to hear from the White House on this. But I first want to go to CNN Chief International Correspondent Clarissa Ward, our correspondent in London. Clarissa, just talk about the significance of what's going on right now.
I mean, this is a seismic event. It's not often you read something cross the wires that makes your jaw drop, but this was certainly fall into that category. And I think what will be crucial in the coming hours is trying to ascertain Israel's claim that the U.S. was aware of this strike. How aware of the strike were they? Did they effectively condone it? And if so, what could the possible impact of that tacit acceptance of this strike be in terms of the relationship between Qatar and the U.S.? And as Kevin was just articulating, and as you and Wolf have been discussing, this is a crucial relationship for the U.S. Qatar is host to the largest U.S. base in the entire Middle East. This is a close relationship that has lasted over many different administrations. And Qatar has effectively cultivated a unique space for itself in terms of being a neutral space where these talks and negotiations between various non-state actors and states and terrorist groups can happen in a safe and sensible manner. This is not the first time, by the way. We're looking very much now at the talks between Hamas and the U.S. and Egypt and Qatar and Israel. But of course, Qatar was also host to the Taliban and was a crucial part of the U.S. navigating its withdrawal from Afghanistan and essentially forming some kind of a dialogue between the U.S. and the Taliban that without an interlocutor like Qatar would be effectively impossible. And I think the question now becomes, beyond the sort of U.S.-Qatar of it, what does this mean for these negotiations at such a crucial point in this conflict? Do they effectively end for the moment? Do they move to a different location? Do we see Qatar try to launch some kind of a retaliation. I'm not even talking about a military retaliation, but some kind of a very strong diplomatic retaliation at Israel. What does that look like? And does it effectively torpedo these efforts, which had been ostensibly, according to multiple sources, gathering some momentum recently to try to push towards some kind of, if not a permanent end, at least a temporary stop to the fighting in Gaza? Pamela?
All right, Clarissa Ward, thank you so much. I know that you're working the phones right now trying to gather more information. We appreciate it.
And I've spent a lot of time in and around Doha, Qatar, at the Camp Asaliya base, as well as the El Udeid Air Base, and this relationship between the U.S. military's Central Command and the Qatari military is very close. It's a key regional ally of the U.S., and we'll have more on the impact of how this Israeli strike is going to impact all of that.
Fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.